Anywhere. Okay. All right, so if you're wondering what that crazy music is, they asked me for music, so I thought, I'm gonna pick something nobody else would pick. So it sounds like it's called Arabian Nights. It sounds like it's like Arabic music. No, it's actually a white guy who just happened to like Arabic music. So anyway, so welcome up. This is gonna be a fun discussion. Just to, give folks, before we dive into the content of what we wanted to do, you've heard a lot of people talk about product market fit. And if you think about outside in, that is the intersection of the thing that you love that you wanna build and what people actually find useful and want to pay for, and is going to give you the traction you need. So outside in is really fundamental to this. And so much has been said about it, but there are two things that are changing. The first is that pace of AI is so damn blazing fast that you really need to change the type of thinking you use to really redefine what does it mean to product market fit, what's going to make it lasting. So we're going to dive into 5 subcategories of product market fit to really understand that and go deeper. So before we do that, though, I just want to start with you, Erwin, and I want to say, tell us a little about Headlamp, about what you do, and then I'll go through everybody else.
Great, thank you. I'm Erwin Estigarribia, CEO of Headlamp. Headlamp's mission is to bring precision medicine to the mental health care space, which is a much-needed problem to be solved, and a very tough problem to solve at that. We do that through very unique and large data sets. We obviously use AI to reason, gain insights, and solve problems on day one for patients, clinicians, and now we're at a very interesting inflection point with the company where we're able to take those insights and essentially help create targeted therapies and help these pharma companies actually reach those patients that need that help. The top 10 drugs in this space were approved pre-1985. So I'll let that sit. So it's a huge problem to solve and a huge opportunity, and what we're working on is sorely needed globally. So very excited to be here.
That's amazing. Great to have you here. India.
Hi there. I'm India Lossman, and I am a co-founder and head of product at Boombox. Boombox is a collaboration platform for musicians. Historically, we've targeted working musicians, so not Lady Gaga, but folks that are DIY. It's very personal for me because my sister is a DIY musician, and it's a pleasure to work for this company and service musicians. They're really creative, they're really inspiring, but they're not very organized. And what we're trying to do is help them be organized, help them collaborate with each other remotely, and stop using a whole bunch of tools and just use our single platform. AI is everywhere in music too, so it's a really interesting time.
Awesome, thank you, India. David.
Yeah, I'm David. I'm Omar's co-founder at Rembrandt, and you've heard a little bit about Rembrandt so far. So, essentially we want to solve the creativity problem in marketing and programmatic, and really drive performance, sort of all of the iceberg under the water, which the ad tech industry has not really focused on investing. We think is sort of the next wave of really driving innovation and scale and performance for brands, and making a better experience out there for consumers, and further monetizing content for publishers. So we think of this as sort of like a 3-sided market, and a rising tide that sort of lifts all boats. And so great to be here and share a little more.
Thank you, David. Kian.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Kian Alavi, co-founder at Maslow. Maslow is building a vertical SaaS embedded finance and AI platform for nonprofits. Nonprofits are historically overlooked. There's $3.1 trillion that flows to nonprofits annually, and currently they use a smattering of point solutions, and there's no center. So the data doesn't connect, and everybody's working with terribly hard workflows. It amounts to something in the neighborhood of like $45,000 to $60,000 a year in labor and software costs for every $1 million that flows through a nonprofit. So it's just insanely inefficient. We joined as a superset portco in late December, and one of the best decisions we made.
I love the diversity of this group. I mean, in terms of the problems that we're solving, it's really refreshing. So now we're going to dive into what I'm going to talk about is the 5 fits that we're going to talk about. So let me just list them really quick. sentence level stuff, and then we'll dive into each. So the first one's founder market fit. And that's very important for every company, but B2B companies in particular, if you don't know the domain you're disrupting, you're at a severe disadvantage. And so that's the first one. The next one we're going to talk about is about the match between your customer segment and your AI precision. Is the problem you're solving solvable with AI at a sufficient level of accuracy that matches the needs of that particular customer segment? In AI-first companies, this is a really big problem. The third one we're going to talk about is decision maker to budget fit. Are the people that you're targeting as users of your systems the actual ones who are going to pay for it or have the budget to pay for it? This is also an area where sometimes people are too fuzzy and confused. Like, I've got this user. It turns out that user doesn't actually have any money or isn't the one that has the decision power. The next one we're going to talk about is core value and commoditization fit, which is you may be doing something and two things could happen. One, 50 other startups, that Vivek was talking about that got hit by that same stone are using the exact same things that you're doing, so you don't have the capability to defend yourself. Or worse, you actually built something really cool that is defensible, and 3 weeks later, it got not defensible because somebody else released some open source that does exactly that and better. So how do you know that that's going to happen, build around it? And the last one, if we have time to it, is we're going to talk about pricing model to value fit. Are you introducing a pricing model that actually has some semblance of match to the value you create that the customer wants to pay for? So we think these 5 things are more detailed things than to just throw around the banner of product market fit, which is too high level. So let's dive into them. I'm going to start with the founder market fit. And you guys are all B2B startups, so jump in at whoever wants to jump in first. Talk about how you see the importance of founder market fit, even from personal experience.
I can jump in, and part of that is, because Omar and I are about to do our 15-year, Omar said he would wear a veil for the 15-year partnership that we've had. So Tom, hopefully you've kept that handy. So I think that's critical. And I never really, we've been on this journey across multiple companies for a long time, and I never really understood the idea of product market fit. It's never felt to me like, okay, you wake up one morning and you're like, aha, we found it. That feels like the day that you're immediately behind, right? because even if you find it that day, the market is evolving. So even if you found the product for the market today, that market isn't static. And so I sort of think of the founder piece of this as critically important, particularly in this era where everyone has access to the same models, has access to the same, sort of like huge amount of talent that's now available globally. You don't have to be in Silicon Valley to get, top quality engineers. We figured out how to work remotely now. And so the founder piece of this is like, what is the core insight that you have? What is the problem that you are so passionate about that you chase it rabidly and just continue to want to solve it and have the credibility to continue to chase it? And I think, it's interesting on the heels of Oracle's announcement yesterday around some of the work and the deals that they've solved and their stock going crazy. You see these founder-led companies, even from Larry Ellison or Meta or Salesforce, Sam Altman and OpenAI, like these folks who are just chasing these problems doggedly despite the technology evolving over decades. And so I just think in a world where you can open up a vibe coding platform and copy someone's user experience in a couple hours, really solving these fundamental problems with people who understand where in their use case there are problems to be solved couldn't be more important.
I'll jump in next. So I actually spent 14 years in the back office of a nonprofit dealing with the pain, so truly a founder market fit, but that doesn't necessarily give me an advantage to win. I think it gives me a few advantages, and I need other things too. But the advantages that you get are just a deep curiosity that just will not leave you alone, right? So it's like, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm jotting things down because I leave my phone downstairs so I won't look at it all night, right? But it's like question after question after question. And a lot of folks will jump in and maybe they don't have the domain, but they have their technical founder. That's okay too. But you need to have that curiosity so that you come up the learning curve extremely fast, right? And so with Maslow, I was able to establish early trust with people who were interested in talking with me, right? Because most of them are like, go screw yourself. We've been oversold, and then you leave us at implementation, and we just don't want to talk to you. But when they see that you have like the light in your eyes, that you really care about this problem, you'll get a minute. And that minute will turn into 30 minutes, and another call, and another call. And before you know it, you're mapping problems, and you hold on to that person. And then you get the next one, and the next one, and the patterns start to emerge. And then you can sequence those problems against, business alignment, right? So having gone through this journey, which is literally crawling over glass to get people to talk to you, and then to believe in you, and then to invest in you, that's the benefit of a founder market fit. Now, that's not to say if you don't have it, that you're screwed. What matters is that you put in the time to come up the learning curve and learn those problems and have that empathy and compassion so that you can have those conversations and unlock the magic, which will lead you to the next step, which is starting to build great product. And if you can build great product, then you can get to the fitting stage. And if you can get to the fitting stage, then you can get to the product market fit stage. And I agree with you. There's no more destination product market fit. It's get there and hang on for dear life and hopefully build a great team and get out on the front foot and keep going.
Yeah, because almost piggybacking on that, with regards to healthcare, we tend to have slow adoption of technology. We have, on the other side of the coin of that, product shelf lives that are much longer because we have patent protection with drugs, et cetera, et cetera. But what doesn't help, obviously, is the misalignment between stakeholders of decision makers, which I think is something we're going to touch on a little bit later. And so the product market fit in healthcare is more about aligning the interest of all of the stakeholders, whether it's a patient, a caregiver, a clinician, or a researcher, and placing a solid anchor there and then building on that. So it's kind of like grab on, hold on, and penetrate as quickly as you can through that.
What about your background in the domain?
Yeah, so I've had 25 years of addiction to hard problems. I think somebody else said that, particularly in healthcare, whether it's, stem cells into humans. We thought at one point we were going to be growing organs and be able to take them off the shelf. Obviously, that didn't come true, but we've made advancements there. CRISPR technology, the whole genome sequencing revolution, et cetera. But technology is great, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a good feel for the alignment of decision makers in that space, you could solve one problem here on the left, but there are 5 others that aren't going to get you to the next stage of that product market fit. And so that's where healthcare I describe as kind of an inchworm. You take 1 step forward and 3 steps back, which could be very, very, very frustrating and capital intensive. So our approach at Headlamp is to make sure we have a solid anchor and then build on top of that as quickly as we can.
Awesome. All right. Everybody just feel free to jump in on any of me. So I'll go to the next one, and I'll start with you, India. So this idea of like customer segment AI precision fit, it's really a nuance most people don't recognize. So I'll give you a very simple example. Let's talk about the very beginning of LLMs, when you first started playing with image creation on Midjourney. If somebody came up and said, I need a lot of money to be able to immediately produce full feature-length films based on this that would substitute for a major movie release from Hollywood, you'd know that the technology wasn't there yet. Maybe in a few years it would be, but at that time it didn't fit. What did fit is if you wanted to create a playful image, because back then it was not that great, but you could come up with some pretty good ideas that were still images. It was still years before you would get to 8-second video, let alone, a 2-hour feature film. So understanding the capability of the AI to match the precise segment that would pay for it and the precise use case within the segment. So enough of a setup.
I think musicians are interesting. There's this like love-hate relationship with AI. Creatives are like, we can't be replaced, right? But they kind of can. And it's tough to swallow. So we're looking at people that are like, don't replace us, we don't want to use AI. And we're looking at another segment that's like, it's a tool like any other. You know, I use a DAW, I can use AI. Make it work for me, help me be more efficient. So we have to be really careful with our messaging. We're not trying to replace you. We're trying to make your life easier. There are so many tools that are table stakes with AI for musicians, and slowly but surely people are getting used to, this is not threatening. I have to use this technology to keep up. I have to keep up my speed, I have to keep up my creativity, and we're just really careful with our messaging and how we implement that set of tools.
I think this is interesting because the evolution of this matters a lot also on the technical sort of cost side of this. So in today's world, in a sort of AI era, the fastest way to drown in inference costs is go after the wrong customer. Absolutely, right? And so you know, maybe a decade ago, when we were at Blue Kai, if we went after the wrong data provider, the marginal cost of a couple million extra rows in a database and processing that was fairly low, right? At Voicea, the marginal cost of running an ASR, like a language model, to transcribe, you know, we were going after business meetings at that, and we had people going to church sermons and, you know, and recording their TVs like all night, right? And so the marginal cost of us transcribing 12 hours of soap operas between, you know, midnight and 8 a.m. was like pretty significant. And those costs have only gone up, right? The marginal cost for us to ingest millions of hours of video content, process video content. And so really being clear on, and this is sort of just like the finance and, you know, dollars and cents piece of this, but I think it sort of indicates like you can waste a lot of time and a lot of capital chasing the wrong segment here. And so being really clear on, you know, are you building sort of a purposeful tool for the customer that you really are precise about? And those people will get better experiences if you're clear on it. You know, we've seen a lot of work in the diffusion space where we look at it and say, okay, for this use case, this is great, but for a brand who needs, you know, perfection on their logo and their colors and their fonts, we just can't even touch diffusion in this case. But there's some techniques we can learn and apply to do other things, I think is really important. And you've got to match sort of the technology to the customer and the use case. Otherwise, you're just burning GPUs, and that's not cheap these days.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So I'll share from our experience. We serve nonprofits as small as $10,000 a year to $75 million a year. So, like in terms of segmenting, we could segment a lot and build a spectrum. And we talk to folks, and I talk to folks all day long. But the promise of AI, or what's getting overhyped to those who are trying to buy into this, is, you know, before it was, can you streamline my work, right? Can you bring it all together in a space where you can streamline my work? Now it's like, can you eliminate my work, right? And so when they're coming to me or we're talking to them, they're like, how are you going to help me eliminate my work or the things that I don't want to do? And LLMs aren't necessarily totally there yet, right? And specifically when we're talking about money movement and compliance and finance and IRS filings, like you can't screw up 2% of money movement, right, for a nonprofit. They'll fail their filing and then they're out, kaput, gone, right? So in terms of how we're approaching it, we explain to them, like, one, we're hardening all your workflows that you had never hardened in one space before, right? So they're all here. You have a system of action, which I believe maybe Dave Yuan of Tidemark coined, but it's a system of action. It's the first time ever we have a system of action. And then, and already, we'll bring in agentic AI, or we'll bring in, you know, it's now going to help work on those things for you. So now we know that it's working perfectly, and we can start bringing in the elimination side of it for the B2B side. But in terms of segmentation for us, it's like the promise for us is eliminate the work. Save me money, save me time, you know, delight me. They don't care about what an LLM means or hallucination or who Sam Altman is or any of that kind of stuff. Like, there's no fanboys and fangirls for AI. They're like, can you finally make my work easier? Right? That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, that makes sense. And not having a 2% mistake on your cash is a pretty big deal. Erwin, you also have a very high cost of applying AI to the wrong problem.
Yeah, we only have to be wrong once, and we're done. And so there are some very stringent, hard and fast rules in healthcare. And because we service a lot of the stakeholders in mental health, there's different levels of appetite for risk. So an early stage researcher is more willing to take a risk and look at data that they haven't had access to in the past, demographically, longitudinal data, historical medical data, et cetera. But when you're interacting with a patient through our application or a clinician, you only have to get that wrong once or fall into the trap of deploying technology because it's easier or much cheaper, for instance, an LLM for therapy augmentation, which has now been shown to lead to psychosis. And so if you truly understand by first principles how these technologies work, you can quickly figure out the level of appetite of risk for who it's interfacing with. So for us, we have divided the business in terms of retail versus enterprise, and they have a different set of tolerances for risks and things that don't quite fit. And so happy to chat with people more offline about that. I have actually a white paper coming out soon on the utilization of process engineering with deploying these technologies, which is a tried and true, over a century old technique of analyzing, bringing technology and assessing that risk of deployment.
Yeah, and just want to make sure everyone doesn't confuse. We're not. This question isn't about is AI too risky to use or not. What we're really trying to get at is for the problem that you are using AI, is the accuracy profile matching that specific customer segment? Because that's where a lot of people get it wrong. So it isn't, obviously there's a yes-no decision, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the case that you said yes, but you misunderstood the accuracy needed for that segment. There's a good article yesterday about whales and rabbits, which is, are you going after the really big deals or the lots of the small deals? And their requirements for accuracy tend to be very different. I was talking to someone in the crowd here from Parallel, about the difference between the big enterprise marketer and how they view a piece of generative video versus, a very small budget marketer who moves faster. These are the kinds of things that you have to struggle with on a daily basis. So moving on to the next one was this idea of like the decision maker and budget fit. Does the people who are actually using or you think are your champion actually have the money or even the authority to do things? And by the way, as recently as this year, I've made this mistake. So it's laughable when you see it, but it's not fun when you run into it. So diving into this in a little bit more detail. So feel free to jump in, folks.
I can jump in. So we built a product that our customers love because we listened to them. We knew who the decision makers were. It was specific roles for musicians, like producers and audio engineers. They control the technology, they make recommendations to their collaborators, and these are the tool sets that people will use. But budget was a problem. They don't have money. It's really, really tough. They're like, give us the world, but we don't want to pay for it. What we've done is we've expanded our target audience, and now we're going after not just working musicians, but hobbyists as well. So these are folks that have jobs, that make music for fun. They have discretionary cash. So we just took the product that we'd already made and said, what features can we use? How can we reskin it, make it fun, and increase the audience? But it was a tough lesson to learn because we made a great product that people loved.
Awesome. So David, I'll prime you on one, which is you've led this thing that's going to happen next week that we're going to announce, which is this move from third-party influencers that needed approval to run this big campaign to first-party. Describe why that fits into this topic.
Yeah. I mean, this is a area that I feel like I just can't get right ever. It just, for every company we've done and throughout the phases of these companies, we just continue to find areas that we think are interesting, and if only the market would believe how interesting it was, they'd figure out how to pay for it. And I actually remember, before I get into that point, one of the most memorable projects, maybe for better or worse, probably for worse, was a project at Blue Kai where I think we sat in a conference room for like months trying to do this reverse auction on selling data that was modeled after the Dutch tulip auctions of like the 1820s. I mean, and you needed a PhD. Actually, you had a PhD on staff from Stanford trying to help us figure this out. And like we were doing, it's like reading your own patent. Like you just don't even understand what this thing is about. So yeah, this has been going on for a long time with us. In our more recent evolution, you know, we started the company going after trying to help influencers monetize their inventory and brands, place products in influencer content, and we were sort of a matchmaker where we would go do, you know, commercial deals and set rates with influencers, and then we'd go to the buy side and say, hey, Pepsi, would you want to be in all this influencer content? And that there's a lot of friction in that. You were essentially a matchmaker or a market maker in between these two sides, and they had different expectations about what each side was worth, and you were stuck in the middle saying, if I don't figure this out, then I'm not getting paid at all. There's no market. And so one of the things we've pivoted hard into is basically saying we're going to provide technology that enables matchmaking to happen, but we're getting out of the economic. Let the market set its own price, and so we'll take a fee for transactions happening through the platform, but we're not going to get in the middle and say, if only we negotiate one side down and we negotiate the other side up, our margin in the middle is fatter. We're just saying like we're gonna get out of that game completely and let the market figure it out.
Quick show of hands, how many people here are doing B2B? All right, quick show of hands, how many people here are doing B2B small business? Okay, so mostly enterprise then? So then everybody should be multi-threading, right? You're talking to tons of people, you're trying to figure out what their value is and what they need. Is that right? Who's heard of the term multi-threading? Some, maybe, okay. When you're talking to an enterprise level, even nonprofits, I mean, these are buying coalitions, right? And we're so early, so pricing fit, we're still working on pricing fit every day, you know? I mean, hopefully we got the Paul Graham thing right, where we're coming in low enough that we can squish the competitor up against the ceiling and have some room to grow, versus, you know, putting ourselves too high to start and then getting totally screwed by somebody else, especially right now when the cost of compute is low and everybody can replicate your product while you're trying to find your moat. So I think, like, whoever's out on the front and talking to folks, you need to be figuring out, like, who is the buyer, or figure out your own taxonomy, but like, who is this person to me, and who is that person to me, and how do they relate to each other, and how am I sending them messages that show them the value that they need to gather, so that they can start having dialogue internally, because you don't want one person to come in at the end and just kill the deal, and you don't want one champion that doesn't have any real power, right? So often you'll get somebody who'll call, be like, this is great, I totally need this, but I'm not the buyer. And then you're like, okay, well, can you take me to the buyer, right? And then you talk to the buyer and like you hear a totally different story. So, you know, what excites the buyer will not excite the champion and vice versa. And so if you're not getting a good understanding of the decision-making across who you're selling into, you're just gonna be at a disadvantage. And, you know, for example, we can explain value and someone's like, yeah, we have the budget for that. And then the other person's like, no, we don't, because the value doesn't fit them. So it's really important to understand like multi-threading and getting some kind of like rubric or framework going so that, you know, when you're talking to people, like, how do you triangulate and find that sweet spot?
Can I just jump in on that? I love that because it's like, particularly with the tech market moving so quickly, you now have big companies building innovation teams. Right, and those innovation teams, their core job is to like get excited about all the cool stuff that you're out there pitching them. But they're like, the more there's an innovation team, the further they are from the CFO, right? And like these mainline budgets, and there's this weird trap where you get these innovation teams excited about what you're doing, and you never exit innovation land. And so you get this false signal on like product market fit.
Yeah, just to riff off. So the thing that you left off that in your example before that was interesting is before you were running a media campaign that required an influencer group to approve it. What you're launching next week basically says it doesn't require any influencer group because you're taking a post that an influencer already got posted on the brand site, and now the media manager who has the budget could be the approver, and that collapsing of the user and the approver into one is the massive unlock that was kind of what you're driving. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, I'll just say one other thing. Like, you can do so much now, right? We were on a call, and it was like 10 people, and we're like right here at the finish line closing this deal, and here comes the accountant that's actually the bottleneck for the workflow this is supposed to benefit. And she says to us, and she's amazing, right? She says to us, well, there's just too many clicks, and I need to inspect this one piece of data, but I have to like open another window. And Sean, my co-founder, is like, zoop over here in Cursor and throws up a screen. He's like, what if it did this? And she's like, done. And we had no idea that she was going to come in last minute and be like the final deciding factor, right? And so like, in Cursor, it understands Maslow, and he was very quickly able to like spin up the solution, and it was a good one, right? Obviously, we have conviction, we have direction, we knew that was like a really good idea, let's go, right? And we closed the deal. So I feel like, decision makers and fitting and all that stuff, like for early stage, I mean, there's an art here, and you have to hustle your ass off to figure it out.
And Erwin, you were talking about designing experiments to figure this out when we were talking before.
Yeah, so we spend we take weeks to prepare for an engagement with pharma. Not all organizations are structured the same. Some are a little bit more heavy leaning towards technology. If there is a digital transformation person on staff, for us, that means that we've discovered no motivation to say yes. And so we actually need to not just get through them, but actually tie them to whoever they're reporting into, which in pharma is traditionally a chief medical or chief scientific officer. And so we come in with good science, good data, and then we can figure out where they play, what stage of the company they are, to figure out the right pricing model that works for them and obviously benefits us. So we tend to do kind of A/B testing with interacting with these companies just to really prove to ourselves that we understand the dynamics. But these days, there are a lot of people that are prolific online, that are very vocal through blog posts, Reddit posts, conferences. An individual that we interacted with at a very large company stood up on the first JP Morgan Healthcare Conference session in January in San Francisco here and said, AI will not change drug discovery. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of the conference. And so that individual has evolved in his thinking over the last 8 months through a lot of pressures, but we've had to be very careful about how we position ourselves and what we could really do for them. And so that A/B testing that we do when we interact with them could be in a very measured way at conferences. We find scientific conferences. We see where they kind of squirm if we present a technology or a way of displaying data that isn't as digestible for them. And in other ways, we've had some happy accidents through that A/B testing where a kind of a C condition appears through a conversation, and we happen to have something that addresses that. And the speed of technology, like the early example for us to kind of rejigger our data and represent so that they understand it and they can absorb it much easier, is something that, quite frankly, 5 years ago we wouldn't be able to do with the types of data we work with.
In India, in your case, having more collaborators helps you get sales done. Am I right there?
It's interesting. You guys have to work so hard for the deal, right? We can get the acquisition. We have to work hard for the retention and having people not churn out because it's so easy to leave us. One of the things we had to do was switch from monthly subscriptions over to annual. Our customers didn't like the idea of it, but we don't want people churning out. We want serious musicians that are going to stay. So sometimes you have to do something that's kind of counterproductive, but it's the right decision to make.
Awesome. All right, so moving on to the next one, which is around finding a core value that isn't going to get commoditized so easily in a world where the technology base is changing so rapidly. What are the strategies that you're using to find long-term defensibility?
Yeah. So for us, and just from previous experience, I get really paranoid on building solutions on other people's platforms because they control your destiny. Companies can merge, cut you out, all kinds of things, and I've learned that the hard way. One of the things that we saw this year, and we got pretty excited about because the field was moving that way, is developing solutions for AI note-taking in clinics, removing that friction, increasing efficiency, bringing transparency, particularly in psychiatry, where notes are taken on all kinds of formats and then they disappear and nobody has access to. And yet there are about 80 plus companies that got funded over the last 18 months specifically to take care of that, so kind of a one-trick pony. We felt that we needed to have that as an add-on to our current offering with clinicians, and the 800-pound gorilla in this industry decided to give it away for free overnight. And so now 80 companies are trying to pivot, figure out what they're going to do. For us, it kind of was a very harsh reminder of there are incumbents that can quickly move into that space, and very low-tech, AI-based wrappers on workflows are going to be commoditized quicker than you can blink. And so having that as part of your value proposition is not going to last very long, even in healthcare, which I mentioned earlier has longer product life cycles. So for us, the way we protect what we have and what we're building is really based on the data that we harnessed. It's ours. We have know-how on how to collect it, how to curate it, how to build insights, and how to present that ultimately to the end buyer of that data.
Any other?
I mean, data for sure. Like if you have, for us, we're creating a system of record. So for a nonprofit, previously their system of record and still is an accounting system. And very expensive ones or very common ones like QuickBooks, right? But what that is it provides 12 snapshots in time of their financial state, which is terrible mile marking or guidance through a year, right? So now that we took a hold of the transaction and the baking layer, every dollar in, every dollar out, we handle it. We track it, we add the compliance to it, we're collecting all the data on it, right? And so now we are their source of truth, even though it all pushes over to accounting so they can get their general statements and be compliant at the end of the year. But they're coming to us because we're giving them real-time data, right? And we have that real-time data. So their business is not running on those 12 mile markers anymore. That's just checkpoints and compliance. Their business is running on Maslow. And their decisions are being informed by Maslow. And for the first time ever, many of them are running on real-time data. So I think data, one, is a huge moat. That's the thing. If you can get it, you need to be getting it because that's a whole nother space there. But beyond that, all technology is going to asymptote. Everybody's going to be building as much, somebody said it earlier, someone's going to spin open a cursor and try to copy what you're doing. So what are you doing beyond that? Right? So,
yeah, I think we've taken we've done all of the above. So, and the market sort of shifted its perspective on what it values as well. So, 18 months ago, if you'd asked us, we were like, hey, we're going to build a foundation model for brands to get controllable diffusion for videos, and then we've swung the other direction and said, you know what, how are we going to compete with these multi-billion-dollar companies putting huge resources into training? Let's figure out unique perspectives on workflow and how do we and stitch together existing, open source or commercial models to custom to our workflow. And we've done a lot of work in the middle, which is how do we fine tune on models that we host that are foundation models that other people train, and then we make sure sort of tailor-made to our use cases. And I don't think there's a clean answer to this. Data, of course, for sure, having a unique data asset, but I don't think there's some insight where it's oh, if only you follow this recipe, you will have defensibility for the next 100 years. I think a lot of this is sort of you've got to play in it's sort of like a playbook, right? Which is if you can invest in something foundational that you think is truly defensible, do that. and acknowledge that you probably are, the people in this room are competing against huge companies with huge resources, and all they need to do is pay attention to the problem you care about, and they're going to out-resource you. I think part of this is about moving quickly to find use cases that matter by using whatever you can off the shelf, whether that's a commercial model or something that is open source that you can just like build workflow and figure out, is there a there with this kind of technology for your use case, and then start producing data that allows you to create something unique that you do truly think is sort of like a flywheel that is defensible. But I don't know that there's like a silver bullet on this that says, you know, follow these 3 steps to, you know, infinite defensibility.
Also driving value nonstop through, you know, knowing the user and getting those workflows right.
Yeah, and I think we just assume that like a lot of this is going to become tech debt that we don't build for durability on a lot of this stuff right now. Like Rishav, who's here on the team, he runs a significant portion of our engineering. He's like, yeah, I just like assume everything I build we're gonna throw away, and I think like I kind of hate hearing that. I'm like, can we just get it right the first time? But I think there's some, you know, from an engineering leader, like there's something to that, which is don't get so enamored with this approach that you're stuck with tech debt. And as a partner on the engineering side, you always want that, right? You don't want to have someone push back and say, well, I invested all my time on this thing that you asked me to build, and so now we're stuck with it. So I think it's all of the above. And I think that maybe that's the recipe to success.
I agree with that. We have to embrace everything out there that's open source. We can't waste time building something that already exists. Stem splitting is a commodity in music for musicians. Chord generation, lyric generation. It's expected, and we're not going to build it. We're just going to put it in our product in a way that musicians will embrace. I'm sure everyone has heard of Suno. We can't outdo Suno, right? We have to embrace competitors. We have to use everything at our disposal to make this work.
I'm going to be a little bit like a bee and tie together a few things that you guys said. Because I do think there are some playbooks here that didn't go away, like building network effects of customers, suppliers in a two-sided network. It's still a valid strategy, even in the AI world. The other thing you guys talked about, you know, using data in a defensible way, and what you were talking about, David, was be prepared to move very fast, take code that's out there, but there's a transition between you two that makes sense, which is you figure out fast where there's traction, and then that creates data uniquely in your platform, which you can then train on and build defensibility. So you're right, there isn't one size fits all, but some of these old playbooks are still good playbooks.
Also, speed is required. Like if you're not moving fast and your team's not moving fast, like you're not going to find your moat, right? That's required, and that doesn't mean like over-index on hustle culture and like never sleep. I saw your post about making sure you sleep. Like it's important. You can't get by on 4 hours, and that's for real. But like you need to have speed to learn, and then you can get to that moat building. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're at time. So any closing comments on what you thought was most important or what's missing?
I think, you know, every problem deserves attention and its own solution. I don't think you can take a playbook and just parry that unless you're trying to solve the exact same problem. I think the way you solved the problem last week is going to be different than today and tomorrow. You know, not to harp on the last question and topic that we talked about, but our customers expect defensibility from us. They want security in the data that we provide to them and that their molecule is going to be secure. So that's unique to us. It might mean nothing to what you're working on, and that's fine, but it might spark a memory 6 months or 6 years from now, and that might be worthwhile. But I think things are evolving fast. I like velocity. I actually like acceleration more because I think things aren't slowing down and we haven't hit a constant, and I just don't see that happening. But that means that at the end of the day, you've got to have multiple touch points with everybody involved and figure out quickly what's not working.
Awesome. So next time someone asks you about product market fit, just ask them which fit are you talking about. So thank you very much for joining us on this panel. And Erwin, I think you are going to talk about the next one.
Should we go?
Yes, I think we
Okay.
go.
Time
Thank
to
you,
go.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.